then add the F7a Mk2 model, modeled completely new from the ground up with our latest techniques and pipeline procedures. Chris thought it would be cool to have the classic Hornet and the new version run side by side, and players would have the opportunity to keep the old Mk1 as a classic collector's item. We were also going to revisit the Mk1 one last time with an update on materials and damage systems to have it mesh better with our current assets. While we wanted an updated and new Hornet, we still wanted to keep the essence of the Hornet line of spaceships, rugged and relatively simple, yet very effective. Also, I had the thought that from a distance, one should be able to tell that the ship is a Hornet F7. Essentially, I wanted to update the lines of the Mk1 Hornet and also bring the mesh up to a higher fidelity and functionality level.
Hey everyone, welcome to Reverse the Verse. Today is Friday, August 12th, 2016. This week I'll be your host, Tyler Whitkin, Community Manager in the Austin, Texas studio. Joining me to kick things off is somebody many of you are probably familiar with, lead vehicle artist Chris Smith. How you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going?
So yesterday you had the opportunity to show off some of the work that you've been working on recently. And I don't know if you've been on our forums or on Reddit in the last 24 hours, but people are extremely excited about it.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I'm glad. Yeah, I've read a couple comments, and yeah, it's been positive so far, so that's good.
Awesome. So one of the things I wanted to know first off the bat, working on the Hornet F7a, how was that after working on the original Hornet? Was that like exciting? Was it different?
Well, yeah, I mean, working on the Hornet was always, going to be great because it's one of the most iconic ships in the Star Citizen universe. It was featured in the first video. And, since then, we've had it in the game for a long time. And the first time I got to work on it a couple years, I mean, this was like 3 years ago now, I think, when I did the first pass. And, I didn't really have time to do what I wanted to do. And this time I finally got the chance to do it, basically.
That's awesome.
The first time was sort of like just remodeling parts and retexturing. And then I had to quickly move on to, I think it was the 300i or something. But, yeah, it was great because, this is one of the best ships in the game, I think.
Awesome. No, I agree. So for some of you who may not be familiar with some of the contributions and ships that Chris Smith has worked on, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the past ship families or series that you've been a part of?
Well, when I first started, I did the 300i, and then after that, the 300i series. And then I worked on the Hornet, did like a little rework on that. And then also did some variances. I worked on the Mustang and had some help with variances there from the other guys. They did that, but I did like the base one. And then M50.
Nice.
Was a crowd favorite.
Yeah.
Constellation with Josh Coons. The Scout.
Okay. So you said with Josh Coons. So some of the ships, it's you don't always just basically have the ship to yourself. Sometimes you have to work with other people, artists specifically.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Josh and I started working together on the Constellation. That was sort of the first one. I mean, usually I would kind of just do the ships on my own.
Okay.
But with the Constellation, it was so big.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do a good job, and we had a certain time limit. So
how do you split up the tasks? Like, do one of you work on one aspect of the ship while the other works on the other, or how does it work?
Well, yeah, for that one for sure it was easy, because it's so big. He basically took the exterior, and I did the interior.
Cool. Okay. Awesome, cool. So just in case you didn't know, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be taking questions live from our viewers. So for those of you watching, you can go to robertspaceindustries.com, join the chat room. Go ahead and post your questions there. Make sure you preface them with the word question in brackets. You don't need to repeat your question more than once because we have auto scroll turned off. So we'll be able to sift through them easy. Got the laptop right here. So while they're going ahead and getting some of their initial questions in and rolling, how is it different working on all the ships that you just mentioned, right? Because you've been here for a long time, so you've kind of seen the process and the pipeline change or evolve. What has that been like? I mean, how has it changed?
Well, I mean, from the first ship, it's changed quite a bit, and it took a while. I mean, the first couple of years were a lot of almost pre-production and trying out things,
Yeah.
And that kind of reflects. And I mean, now we're kind of reworking the ships, because
right.
We have changed it and improved it so much, also with the help of some of the guys in England, Nathan, he knows a lot about CryEngine and those guys. So you know, they helped out a lot, and we built out the pipeline, and now it's pretty solid. It's good, it's fast, you know. Now we're able to reuse some of the you know, textures or assets, you know, to build ships faster.
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
I
so
think a lot of
that's
people have noticed that, and even called it out that we've been pumping out. It seems like there's a flight ready ship, a hangar ready ship coming out like
yeah,
every patch practically. So
right,
it's definitely, and I think that mentality of just over time honing in a process and structuring that pipeline, it really goes even further than just ships. It seems like a lot of
oh
the
yeah,
content it picks up momentum, and then we start seeing you know, large amounts of content get pushed
yeah.
out, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it pushed through the whole development, you know, like the characters
Yeah.
and the environment and all that. You know, that it just gets better and more efficient, you know, as you go, and everybody just kind of gets worked in, you know, and
Yeah.
then it just kind of flows. And for the ships, we definitely need it, you know, because there's a lot of ships to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. When I talked to Chris about beginning to do the Hornet segment, I hadn't seen all of the details of the Hornet F7a, so it's been an awesome process just getting that segment ready for yesterday. For anybody who hasn't watched ATV yesterday, definitely worth checking out. A lot of good content there. So what do you say we waste no more time and dive into some questions from the
Let's do it.
viewers? All right, so let's see what we got here. Boom, ba boom. How much creative freedom did you have when working on the Hornet? What is the concepting phase like?
So the concepting phase is actually one of my favorite parts, for sure. I mean, a lot of times in Star Citizen, I really haven't like started or concepted a ship from like the beginning. I mean, this Hornet one is like pretty much the closest one probably, and because I was able, you know, to take like a basic, you know, like the ship, you know, which the old one was basically like a concept for me, and to make the new one. So, you know, as far as the creative freedom goes, I pretty much had all the freedom I wanted, and
Yeah.
then, you know, basically what I'll do is you know, I'll start modeling and then present it to Chris and some of the other artists here, and then we have feedback sessions.
That's good. It's always good to get an extra set of eyes on
Yeah,
stuff. And so, like all things in game development, it's just a very iterative process,
right,
bouncing things
right.
around.
But as far as creative freedom goes, I have a great deal.
Okay,
I just
cool.
kind of go with it. You know, Chris, you know, since I've been around for a while, you know, he kind of trusts me, you know, to a certain point, and then, you
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
I show it to him, and it goes from there. And
Yeah.
it's you know, it's a back and forth
Yeah. So I imagine
process.
there's a lot of tedious things that maybe people don't realize. It's not just think of a ship and start, you know, playing. It's you have to keep track of like proper metrics, like the character
Oh
has to be
yeah,
able to
yeah,
fit and for all the various animations.
yeah.
And so I imagine that's a long process during the pre-production phase.
Well, yeah. I mean, now we have that all fleshed out a little bit more too. Like the animations, you know, we have, you know, like the pilot getting in out of the seat is actually the same one as the original Hornet. You know,
Okay,
that
cool.
saved the animators and it saves memory in the game. It just makes things more efficient that way. To just like reuse things, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. When I saw the Hornet F7a for the first time, one of the things that immediately was something that I was like, "This is awesome." Was it seems like it has more round and organic shapes around the
Hmm.
ship, a little bit sleeker. So,
Hmm.
what was the idea behind going with that stylistic
Well,
thing?
you know, Chris and I, you know, we had some email discussions before when we started the redesign, and it was always, you know, sort of the idea that we would take it and make it more sleek,
Yeah,
and you know, because I mean, for me personally, you know, like, I mean, even though the original Hornet is very cool and iconic, you know, there was always like some issues, you know, as
yeah,
far as the form and everything that always kind of like, you know, put me off a little bit, and I was like, I could just make that a little bit better.
yeah,
And so, you know, the idea was then to basically make it like the same difference as like a BMW would make like a new version of their car, you
yeah.
know,
No, I really like that
and like
reference.
the new one was sort of boxy, you know, but
Yeah,
still cool. And then like the 2000s and up, you know, they were a little bit more rounded, but could still tell it was a
right,
BMW.
right.
So that was the idea, was definitely keep the spirit, and you know, you should be able to tell it's a Hornet or an Anvil ship, you know, from a distance still.
Yeah,
And also the sort of like the top view has, it looks like a star, you know, the
yeah,
ship, which
yeah.
I always thought was cool, and so I wanted to keep that, but just make it a little bit more streamlined.
Awesome, awesome. Very cool. So let's see what else we got here. So this one's not directly about the Hornet F7a, but what is your favorite ship that you haven't designed in the game? So I'm assuming that they mean like a real world ship, because I know you use a lot of ships that you mentioned for reference material. Do you have a favorite real life ship or plane?
Like a jet fighter. I mean,
Yeah.
the Tomcat's probably been always like one of my favorite ones.
Yeah.
I used to have like little, plastic models of that thing. F-19s, those are great. The new F-22s, those are, the black ones.
Yeah,
Those are
yeah.
pretty cool.
Awesome.
Even though, like, or the F-35. I mean, I think they've had issues or whatever with those, but they're still cool looking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I definitely like take a lot like for the cockpit and stuff like that because it's a little bit more modern in those. And they use a lot of like, more modern computer screens. Like if
Yeah.
you look at the old Tomcat from the '90s and stuff, I mean, the cockpit's just like full of million dials and everything. So it's a little bit too old school. So I mean, the new jet fighters have a lot of good reference for
Yeah.
what we do.
Speaking of cockpits, the Hornet F7a has been praised so heavily because of the cockpit. A lot of people are really, really happy
Awesome.
about that.
Awesome.
So yeah, fantastic. Well, I can't say it enough because I mean, I still watch the video even though after all of the filming and everything, and it blows my mind. So fantastic work.
I like it.
So let's see here. That kind of feeds into this question. What is the biggest visual or design improvement between the Hornet versions, in your opinion? So going from the MK1 to the MK2.
The biggest improvement visually?
Yeah, in your opinion.
Well, I would say, it's just, like I mentioned earlier, like the top-down view and sort of like even when you view it from the back, like a third-person view, if you were to fly it,
Yeah.
I think it just has a little bit more like an arrow
Sleeker,
shape,
yeah.
like a jet fighter would have.
Silhouette
just a
looks
little bit.
really nice.
Yeah, like the other one, the air intakes kind of jotted out in a jarring way,
Yeah.
as you could say. But basically, yeah, it's just like I think the top-down silhouette. I made the cockpit a little bit more narrow and the overall body, and also the connections, like from the bottom. I think like the bottom silhouette looks a lot better, more sleek now.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So let's see here. Not about the Hornet, but one I think we can still potentially answer. Are they going to let you have a second crack at the 300 series?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I think the general plan is eventually yes.
Okay, cool. And so out of all the Hornet series, which one is your favorite?
I would say, I mean, the F7a is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And when I did the Ghost variants,
That's my favorite, by the
I
way.
like the Ghost. I need to redo that one, of course.
So you did the Ghost.
Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't even know that. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
my favorite Hornet variant.
Also, yeah, with like the cover and the bottom has that kind
Yeah.
of cover. Yeah, and the white decals.
Awesome.
So I definitely want to redo that one, with the new body, and also, but we'll be addressing the old ones too.
Okay,
so
cool. Yeah, that was
improving the
actually
texture on that.
That was actually the next question. Was they were wondering, are the Super Hornet and the other variants going to get a facelift as well? So I guess you just confirmed that.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay,
They
awesome.
should. They need to.
So how many polys is the MK2 Hornet compared to the MK1? Maybe not in exact numbers, but did it go up a lot, or is it just redistributing, or how does that work?
It's actually less.
Really?
Yeah, it's
Wow.
a lot more efficient than the old one. The old one, there was some rework being done, and a couple of things that, we haven't worked out the pipeline.
Yeah.
And so, we had a couple back and forths with that one with CGBot back then, to try and improve it. But it seemed to just kind of pile on the polys and
So how do you make it more efficient?
just to distribute,
It's just
distribute
redistribution.
the polys more efficient,
A lot of it goes to tactics with normal maps.
Yeah,
And
yeah, like the way we lay out the details with the palm maps and everything, that saves a lot. You don't model out the bolts or anything. You just kind of use, a flat plane.
yeah, totally. Okay.
But overall, yeah, the ship needs to be more efficient. I mean, and that's what the pipeline calls for is, and also the damage system, obviously. The old one was really bad because it was the old version. But yeah, this one should be a lot more efficient.
Okay, so we got time for one more question with you. So now that the Hornet is behind you, what's next? What ship are you going to be working on?
Well, right now I'm working on the Constellation Aquila.
Okay, cool. So you're going to be going through all the variants.
I don't know if I'm doing all of them at once, but that's on my list for now. And you'll see what comes after that.
Yeah, and the Aquila is the one with the very rounded front end that has
Yeah,
the
yeah.
really good visibility.
Yeah, it's
Awesome.
the Explorer version, so it has like bigger windows. It has a radar array on top.
Awesome. So after the show, we're going to get together and talk about maybe setting up a segment that maybe we can show that off in the future around the
coming up.
verse. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
It means a lot to me. I know it means a lot to the viewers for you to take time out of your schedule and come answer some questions. When we come back, we are going to sit down with, well, check it out.
We're aiming to release the first NPCs in what's currently called 2.7 in late 2016, in limited numbers at first and then gradually increasing in quantity. The initial set of characters will consist of things like shopkeepers, store patrons, maintenance workers, entertainers, tourists, and vagrants, and they'll be found predominantly in the larger landing zones, Area 18, Port Olisar, Levski, and Grim Hex. We'll be looking to fine-tune performance, animation quality, and usable functionality in particular, with the focus on really amping up the diversity and variety of their actions a bit farther down the road. That first wave of NPCs won't have a lot to say, but you can expect them to get progressively more talkative in subsequent releases. At the design level, most of the gameplay systems are unified under the auspices of subsumption, which means that conversational logic will be able to easily interpret and branch based upon your reputation in a given area.
Hey, everyone. So we are back with somebody who really doesn't need an introduction. Director of the Persistent Universe, Tony Zervik. How are you doing, man?
Pretty good, thanks.
Awesome, awesome. So yesterday you dropped a ton of new information about NPC crews. And so right off the bat, I just want to ask you, how does the process for designing these type of major features work?
Well, for me, it kind of goes back to when I grew up back in the early 1980s, late 1970s. I had this affinity for computer games, and the types of games that I liked were these large, completely open-ended, world simulators. That's why I was so, so attracted to the Ultimas and the Magic Candles. And
I think there's a lot of people in the audience that are on the same page with that.
Yeah, and so you had to, back then, it was pretty much a one-man operation. If you wanted to create that type of game, you needed to be able to do everything yourself. You had to construct the AI and the sound system and the usable system and the world editor so that you could lay out the entire environment. You had to come up with a system so that you could have if you were going to have NPCs and conversations and all your whole mission system and everything else. And so what this got me very used to doing was looking for what I would call points of leverage in the process, areas where you could invest development time up front. And there was a cost to this. There was a cost in terms of, if you just wanted to show short-term progress, you could always brute force something. You could just special case, hack it, invest very little in terms of building things out the proper way, but you could show, progress within a few days, a few weeks, a couple of months, etc. But that wouldn't get you to where you needed to be for the long term, for the level of detail that you knew that you were eventually going to want in these types of games. And so for me, I'm always looking for these points of leverage within the process, and I'm looking for areas where I can take the development, and instead of basically adding a second person and now you can do things twice as quickly, or adding a third person and it becomes a little bit faster, again, that tends to be very linear. What you really need, if you're going to get that exponential curve in terms of how quickly you can produce things, is to basically put a lot of thought, a lot of effort, a lot of development time into properly structuring these tools and data structures, so that your ultimate goal is to basically minimize the amount of time and effort required to go from concept to completion, to getting something from, well, I want to set this particular scenario up, and now I can basically explain that to the game engine in as efficient a way as possible, such that you can bring that to life. And the more that you're able to do that, the more the more interesting the game is going to become. Like an example I use very frequently goes back to the bartender for AI. And if you look at a bartender, a bartender doesn't look very intelligent at all if you enter the bar and he basically says, "Hey, what do you want to drink?" And and you basically tell him, and he gives you one drink, and other than that, he just sits there and polishes the bar. But he starts to look extraordinarily intelligent if he can do that. And if somebody basically starts getting into a fight over here, he can tell him to pipe down, or else he's going to call security. And when somebody drops a glass, he'll go get the broom out of the broom closet and sweep it up. And when the trash is full, he'll take it out. And before he goes home at night, he'll turn off the lights. If he's got the potential to respond to all these different situations that arise, then he starts to look much more interesting. And to me, it's not that that is the game per se, it's that if you put the player into a universe where you've got that level of detail, that breadth in terms of what's going on, then not only does it make it more interesting, but it gives the players many more opportunities, much more potential to basically craft their own unique, interesting solution through this entire maze. And so conceptually, if I were to borrow an analogy from the world of finance, it would be like what Amazon did. For years and years, Amazon was basically making an investment in their infrastructure, building out all these distribution centers, basically refining their online model. And they could have, long ago, basically stopped investing, stopped spending, stopped building for the future, and just started minting money up to a certain level. But they were convinced that longer term, they'd be in a much better, a much stronger position versus their competition if they continue to do that, and basically, push it to the limit. And so now you see after, 20 years, of that going on, they're just now getting to the point to where they're starting to, flip into that other mode where, most of the hard work's been done. And now you look at how they're basically performing relative to a Walmart or relative to a Target, and they're absolutely destroying them. And this is, obviously the time frames are dramatically different, but you get the basic point, which is that spending time and effort up front will often pay enormous dividends on the back end if you do it properly.
Awesome. Tony Zervik, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not even needed for this bit. He can just carry the rest. So we're going to go with the same theme as earlier. Go ahead and get your questions rolling in RSI chat, preface with question and all that jazz. We are looking for questions specifically about the Around the Verse segment that went out yesterday in regards to NPC crews and hiring and scheduling. And then we can also take a little bit of questions from last time we had you on Around the Verse. We did a little bit of talk about professions. So let's waste no time and jump into a few of these. Why don't you tell us about what feature you are looking forward to most in the Star Citizen universe and why?
To me, I would say that the feature that I'm most looking forward to isn't actually, an individual feature. I've said this before. It's the breadth of features. It's the ability for the player to choose their own path through the world. And what you need, when you have so many choices, the counterpart to that is, consequence. There needs to be repercussions to your actions.
Absolutely.
And if you think about it in terms of combat, in this game, you can be a pirate. You are now basically doing things that are illegal. Therefore, we need to have in place an apparatus, security, reputation system, etc. NPCs that will not deal with you if you've got that type, if you've been doing that type of stuff. And these are all things that the system allows you to do that, but it will push back, against that. If you look at it in terms of you're a miner, you will have the choice as to what do you want to mine. Do you want to stick to the safe, secure zones? You're probably not going to make as much money. If you want to try to make a fortune, you're going to have to basically, take some chances.
Yeah.
And, are you going to basically Are you going to form an alliance with some other miners and you guys go out and stick as a group together? Or are you going to hire a bunch of mercenary ships, which is going to cut down on your profitability? The point is, we're putting in place a lot of different levers, and it's up to the player to ultimately, rearrange those things as they really want to do to get the type of game experience that they're looking for.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. This is one of those moments when I skate the line of coworker and then like fanboy. Like I love hearing about this type of stuff. So when it comes to working with an NPC crew, is trust or deception something that you may have to worry about, like an NPC potentially lying to you, or once you're paying them, does it seem like they're with you?
Well, it really depends upon what type of NPC you're talking about. If you're talking about crew members, then in general, we're going to be more straightforward in implementation. They're there as really an extension of you, your ship, your capabilities, et cetera. If you're talking about the NPCs that you deal with that are external, the ones in the world that offer you a mission, it's like that. Absolutely, some of those guys will not be, some of those guys will not be so up and up. You may be offered, a screamingly good deal in terms of, where there's a supposedly really lucrative, set of asteroids just waiting for you to mine it, and you show up, and basically it's a pirate trap. So there will be a lot of that type of stuff, to where just like in the real world, just because something looks one way doesn't necessarily mean that it really is. But yeah, we're not going to be so arbitrary about it. We're gonna put a lot of time and thought into figuring out how to what mechanisms do we provide to the players such that they can make informed and intelligent choices, as opposed to you roll the dice and you went left and you wind up getting slapped because we decided to set things up this way. That to me is not a very fun aspect of the game, when you've got those types of just Boolean outcomes and there's no way for you to process the data beforehand so that you can make an informed decision.
Awesome. All right, so let's see what else we got here. Outside of landing zones, how will NPCs impact the game?
NPCs are actually going to play a huge role in getting the game where it needs to be. And when I say that, I mean, if you think about a world where it's just players, you could have a lot of interaction, you could have a lot of combat, you could have guys forming alliances, but the piece of the puzzle that you'd be missing is that at any given time when we're sending you off to do this, or you've made a decision to do that, we wouldn't be able to guarantee that the other pieces on the board are set up properly. In other words, you accept a mission, to go into deep space and recover a satellite, and maybe, designers have set things up so that, well, this one, it's you're being paid a very high price to go out and do this, and so we want to make sure that the danger you face for taking that on is appropriate. And if we had to rely upon players to always be the counterparty in one of these transactions, it wouldn't, we wouldn't be able to do that. It'd be more, sometimes you'd take on a very lucrative mission and you'd run into nothing and you'd be bored out of your mind and you'd scratch your head and go, well, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before, to where it would feel very arbitrary in terms of sometimes I take sometimes I take on a mission for very little money, and I have tons of I have tons of challenges that I face in order to get that pittance. Other times I take on something that offers me a fortune, and I don't, and I don't run into much of a challenge at all. And so for us to properly balance everything, we need to be able to rely upon NPCs to fill in the blanks as necessary. Now that doesn't mean that we can't intelligently pit players against each other at times, and we will absolutely aim to do that. If you're a miner and you're going out here, well, then we're going to have a pirate organization, and they may know about where there's a lot of miners doing their business, and when you actually go over to that pirate base, assuming you've got enough reputation so they'll talk to you and they et cetera, then they may want you to go prove yourself by picking on these poor hapless miners over there. Meanwhile, there's miners, on the other side, and so so there will be a lot of this player versus NPC, player versus player, player versus NPC and player. Ultimately, it's all just different, different colors on the palette with which we're going to be painting these different scenarios.
Fantastic. Your answers are thorough, and this is great. That was awesome. So let's see. This is a good one. Where do you find your inspiration for your designs?
To me, a lot of that comes just again from when I grew up. The classic games, 70s, 80s. What I actually like, even to this day, is that they were what I would call pure, and by that I mean they didn't have the computing horsepower to be able to do anything particularly sophisticated in terms of their execution. But there are many games I've referenced in the past, whether it's the Ultimas, that I love, Crusader, which was, largely, I always used to say, inspired by Muse Software's Castle Wolfenstein, Loose Cannon, which was inspired by Steve Jackson's Autoduel. There's so many games from back then to where you could see the potential, but the technology wasn't sufficient to do the ideas justice. And it's not that you look back to those ideas and you basically just want to pull them and integrate them into your game. It's that I think having played so many of those types of games, I now look at things from a very mechanical point of view. You look at things in terms of the raw components, which is all those games, largely had. They give you some token graphics, but that, you really had to use your imagination to fill in the blanks. And so when I look at a game nowadays, the visuals and and that type of stuff, it comes, for me, it comes second. It's the underlying skeleton of the game. It's making sure that the balance is proper. It's making sure that you've got all of these parts and counterparts set up properly, that that basically drives the whole process forward. And so I think once you've basically gotten yourself used to thinking about problems in that fashion, then a lot of this just comes naturally.
Awesome. Well, I think we got time for a couple more here. Let's see here. So you mentioned that NPC AI will differentiate in regards to time of day. Do you think that we will see different NPCs regarding the day of the week? So let's say it's a weekday as opposed to a weekend.
That's something that we've actually talked about specifically, and I think you'll see that. I think it'll be less frequently used. I think that you're going to see the impact once we, enable the 24-hour schedules, that you're going to see every single day. And you would expect to see it, right? It's like, you show up at night, you don't expect to see as many people at this landing zone.
Yeah.
You show up in the day, you expect to see a different mix of people, et cetera, et cetera. When we've in the past talked about this, specific concept, it's usually been along the lines of there's going to be some sort of event that happens only periodically. There's a like Hurston, for example. We were talking about having a ship that, because it's a commodity planet, and you've got all of these overworked, oppressed workers that being exploited, and so it was only natural, when you're kind of like following the logical sequence of events, that some of these guys would be seeking to pilfer some of these valuable valuable ores and stuff that they're pulling out of the ground. And so what we wanted to have is a ship, and having it show up every day, every night at 3 a.m., that becomes a little bit too, too repetitive, too predictable. Exactly. And so in that particular case, we were talking about, well, it'd be neat if this guy showed up, every second, Tuesday or something like that, or maybe he only shows up on occasion, and it's always several days out once you actually talk to a particular guy in the bar, something like that. So I think we will absolutely have less regular type of scheduled events, but that'll be more on just a case-by-case basis.
Do you think it's possible that potentially you try to go to a shop and potentially the shopkeeper is out for a sick day, even something like that?
The shops and all of that stuff, closing down shops and the economic impact of everything there, that's been discussed in the past, but that's really, it's much farther out. In the short term, we're just trying to basically get, as much of the plumbing, as much of the infrastructure, as much of the basic skeletal architecture up and running, and then we'll, wind up revisiting some of these things and say, oh, well, do you want to have the concept of a riot on a planet? Do you want to shut down these shops? And what's the impact to the economy? And so that's all stuff. It's all possible, especially given how we've set a lot of these systems up. But it's not a near-term focus.
Okay, awesome. I think we got time for one more question. Let's see. Boom, boom, boom. Can I hire NPC to crew a ship that I will personally not be on board?
That's another one that's been discussed in the past, insofar as you eventually having the capability to have a guy transport something from point A to point B. Would you eventually be able to actually own a shop, etc.? And at least as of right now, I lean predominantly towards I want, if we're going to have if we're going to have this type of detailed world, I want the player to be a part of it, and I'm less interested in trying to turn the game into something completely different. In other words, if you think about that concept and you follow it, through to its logical conclusion, what it really means is, and there are a lot of games that do this, to where this is what I mean by the other day
controlling a fleet
when I
or
reference
something.
Sim Citizen or
Yeah,
something like that,
absolutely.
which is the only way those types of things really work well, is if you have a lot of other bits and pieces of information and levers you can pull, etc., on the part of the player to allow them to do that efficiently, to do that effectively, to actually make that a game. And the problem then becomes that it just starts to defocus us. It pulls us away from where we want, to where we want the real impact of the game to be. And so I don't think it's likely that you're going to be sending out, unattended ships, because then it just becomes a roll of the dice, right? It's like, it's literally, we're just saying, what's the overall aggression level here, and what's, and you basically flip the switch and it says, sorry, that guy got destroyed. And you're like, well, did you have a fun time? And you say, no, I didn't have a fun time at all. and then you would say, well, why wasn't I informed of what the threat level was along there? Okay, so we'll give you that capability. And then you want to be, and
Right, it's a whole nother beast.
That's exactly it. It very quickly becomes a whole other beast. And I don't think anyone would, disagree with the statement that this game is already extremely ambitious. And so we're, as ambitious as it is, we're also in a number of different areas trying to keep the design as focused as possible, so that we can get these other features out to the community quickly. And then I would say the second pass is really going to be more refining, balancing, getting everything feeling really good. And once that's all
Once
done,
we're post-release,
then that's exactly it. And so much farther down the road, then you can kind of come back and say, hey, now that all of that stuff is
Right.
done, where,
what can we explore now?
That's exactly it. And whether it would be something like that, or whether it would be owning stores, or whether it would be, stuff along that line, we would just basically bring up the next tier of features and figure out which ones were going to be of most interest, to the player base, which ones were going to give us the most bang for the buck, and then move forward as appropriate.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come and do all of this. Like I said with Chris, it really does. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to the viewers. We know you guys are very busy and take time out of your schedule to come and hang out. So before we sign off, I wanted to give you guys a couple community updates. First off, next week is Gamescom. What this means is that starting Wednesday, we will be live streaming in Germany from the show floor alongside well-known Star Citizen streamers Captain Richard, Twerk17, Bad News Baron, and DJ Knight. Friday evening, we will have the Gamescom party presentation. You do not want to miss that. You won't have to. We're going to be broadcasting live on Twitch. Along with all of the Gamescom festivities, next week we are going to run a free fly. So if your friends or family or anybody you know has been thinking about trying out Star Citizen, it will be the perfect opportunity. And for those of you who are already backing, you'll have the chance to fly some ships that maybe you haven't flown in the past. It's going to contain the Mustang Gamma, the Sabre, and the Freelancer. A reminder, there will be no ATV or RTV next week due to all of the Gamescom festivities, but fear not, there will be plenty of awesome content and things going on. And to follow that, make sure that you are following all of social media and our official website for any information, for updates, and some fun behind-the-scene pictures that Jared and Thomas and a few other people are going to be taking throughout the week. Sandy mentioned it on Around the Verse. We have revamped the newsletter that gets sent out every Friday to your email. Definitely worth checking out. It's packed with new information, updates on the leaderboard, and an art sneak peek. We'll have another one coming out later today. And then lastly, just want to take this moment to thank the subscribers for everything that you do, making ATV, RTV, and all the video content we're putting out possible. And thank you everyone else for just supporting Star Citizen and letting us do something that a lot of us have always dreamed of doing. And so thank you guys very much. Thanks again, Tony. 07's in chat, and we'll see you guys in the verse.
Letters.